I think that time has come for Europe to build its own tech giants. And I think that Swan can be one of these. Frankly, after a couple of months at Swan, that was one of my main questions. Hey, what is the playbook of a B2B European company that we could reuse and apply to ourselves? And it's crazy because it's not that obvious.
Can you maybe kind of explain that expansion story now at Swan?
We try to keep having this very down-to-earth, like a pragmatic approach to open new countries and to prioritize our roadmap.
I think that might be a big one.
Yes, actually, maybe I should have started by this because that's actually your number one challenge. Huh?
In this episode, we are bringing to you Florent Tardivel, CCO of Swan, an innovation leader in the world of fintechs. Swan offers a banking-as-a-service platform, also known as a BaaS. Now, what does this mean? Well, Swan is what they call an e-money license. It's like they are a bank, but instead of being one, they put their license at the use of other companies that, for example, want to embed banking features in their applications. Got it? Anyways, enough fintech for now. In this discussion, Florent takes us in their European expansion. Florent joined about 2 years ago, right after Swan raised its Series A. And back then, the team had about 15 projects secured, which were actually done by the CEO and Chief of Staff. There was no actual sales team, nor processes in place. Now, fast forward today, they've just signed their 100 clients and are expanding geographically, with offices in 3 countries, almost 4 actually, and doing businesses in more than 13. And guess what? They're just getting started. That's why in today's discussion, you'll get how Swan started in France but expanded beyond it. And as you will see, they purposely embedded an European culture early on. You also get what the advantages are of being local, because it's not always necessary to be local for doing business. But still, Swan has opened an office in Germany, in Spain, and soon in the Netherlands, afterwards Italy. And so we'll dive in to understand why that is the case. And last but not least, you'll learn about today's condition of the fintech scenes and how it's not too late to disrupt the market together with Swan. And now for my conversation with Florent Tardivel. To start, I'm very happy to have you on the show today. I think that you guys, and actually you with your Stripe experience before, but also now as Chief Commercial Officer at Swan, you have like particularly interesting experience when it comes to European expansion. So I'm sure we'll deep dive on that. But before we do so, can you maybe just introduce yourself? Who is Florent and why you're at it? Can you also explain what Swan does exactly?
Yeah, sure. And likewise, a pleasure to be here and thanks for inviting me. So I'm Florent Tardivel. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer here at Swan. I've joined Swan 2 years ago, literally 2 years ago. It was in August 2021. And I joined them right after the Series A that had been raised by Swan with Axel. And back then, as you said, I had a previous experience at Stripe, and broadly speaking, I had been working in this fintech industry, even more broadly into the startup ecosystem for a dozen of years. And when I was recruited by Swan, I think the purpose of my recruitment was, okay, we start to have an early product market fit. We managed to sign a handful of clients, but for now, sales have been performed because it was mostly it's a very product-driven company, Swan, and we were back then 35, 40 people. The bulk of these folks were either product people, tech people, engineers, a bit of compliance, and that was it. Sales were ensured by the CEO, Nicolas Benadi, and our Chief of Staff, Luca Carach, our then Chief of Staff. And as such, there was a clear need to accelerate in terms of sales and to structure this sales function. So that was my job. And I think we've done a decent job for now. 2 years later, we have just signed our 100th customer at Swan. We have managed, and I think we'll touch on this, but we'll speak about our European expansion. We've also managed to sign larger customers, and that was one of the main challenges that we had. And the team grew from CEO and Chief of Staff and Florent Tardivel up to we now have a team of 20-ish people, half of them being account executive, so focused on new business. We have now 6-7 people on account management, some people on revenue operations, and that's about it.
Okay, well, congrats on closing that 100th customer and on the expansion and everything that you guys do so interestingly good. Can you maybe explain what Swan does exactly? Because I had to study it myself, to be honest with you, but I'm sure that you will be very capable of explaining what Swan does for also people that are not coming from the fintech world.
So the usual word we use to describe Swan is a banking as a service platform. And essentially, we serve companies that are not banks, that do not have a banking license, but that still want to equip their own customers with financial services, financial products. This can be bank accounts, this can be cards, and any kind of payment workflow that you can imagine. And having said this, like, what are these companies that do not have this license, but that are willing to issue such product? Actually, there are plenty of this. So I think the historical customers of banking as a service platforms were startups that were willing, neobanks that were willing to just disrupt this market of the bank industry, but that didn't yet have the legitimacy or the money or just they were not big enough to have their own license. So the historical work of banking as a service platform was to serve that kind of companies by lending, renting their own license. Swan, we do have what is called an EMI license, an e-money license, an e-money issuing license, and we sort of rent it to our partners, to our customers. I will refer, by the way, to our customers as partners and the end customers. So the customers of our partners are customers or end customers.
Good distinction.
Anyway, long story short, neobanks are the sort of like vanilla customer of a banking as a service platform. And I think that Swan, the company was created 4 years ago. We had very early on a focus on embedded finance. And it means, how can we equip financial softwares, HR SaaS, so that they can provide to their own customers, these can be companies in this case, to have bank accounts and to facilitate some payment workflow or to issue cards. I give you one or two examples to make this very concrete. There is this company in France called Agicap, which is one of the most successful scale-ups that we have here in France. It's a treasury platform. It's a treasury management software. Until they had Swan, they were just telling people, hey, if you want to optimize your treasury, your cash flows, here is what you have to do. And the CFO of company using their software still had to connect to their banking interface, sometimes numerous of them, like 2, 3, 4 banks for some companies, and to operate all the payment workflow on a different screen than the Agicap software. Now that they have Swan, they offer all these companies to create behind the scene a Swan account, which is, I didn't precise it, but delivered in a white label way. So like we have no purpose to be of course we're present in the terms and conditions and so forth, but otherwise we are hidden, and it's really Agicap who is labeling these Swan accounts as Agicap Pro accounts. And then in the click of a button, people can orchestrate the payment workflow with the Swan account being used as a pivot account. And I think that's a very concrete example of when we use and hear this word embedded finance, this is what it means. It's how do we put financial management where it should be? Why should you still connect to your old-fashioned bank while you can still remain on your software, remain on your HR SaaS software to pay salaries in advance, for instance?
Gotcha.
That's what Swan is solving.
Is it as simple as plug and play, or is it really, or are you guys really an integrator in all of those features actually that they want to develop?
So no, we're not plug and play. We have seen some high, all-time records of integration performed sometimes in a matter of a dozen of days. We can, by the way, speak about this a little more further, but we propose now faster way to integrate with open source. We've open sourced our dashboard and our interfaces so that people can really accelerate in their integration. But otherwise, I would say that you still have to invest some time. We don't do the integration ourselves. We are really a product, we're a product, but we don't offer the integration. People have, like, usually we speak with companies that have their own developers in-house capable of integrating Swan. And I would say that in average, like for a small project where like things are quite simple, you would take a month to integrate. And we have like the deepest integration can take up to 5-6 months. Sometimes, or like often what we observe, and I can say it after 2 years at Swan, what we observe is companies that actually never end their integration, but because they keep adding new features on top of what has already been built.
Okay, interesting. And what can you say about the, let's say, just the sales context, the sales environment within Swan? Because you already mentioned kind of the team structure, but what is it like? What are the priority channels? Is it inbound, outbound? What are go-to-market motions? What's, the sales cycle like? Who do you sell to, like, or work with, I should say?
Okay, there are, I think, at least 6 questions in your question.
And anything you think is relevant for this discussion, let's say.
Yeah, definitely. So maybe just to start answering this question, we have actually just announced our Series B. We have just raised a quite nice 37 million euro funding round.
All right,
it's our
congrats.
Series B. So we're quite proud of it, and I think that will help us accelerate on some things that we have observed on our go-to-market strategy. I think historically, one thing that I have said is let's try to be the business angel of European fintech, and I quite like this approach of being labeled as a business angel, because you sort of accept the risk of serving these startups. You accept that with some of these companies you might not even have a break even, because that's your business model. But you also know that if you manage to sign 100 companies throughout Europe, 100 startup fintech, one of them will become a unicorn, hopefully 2 or 3. 15 of them will do very decently, and granted, some of them will not survive because that's the life of startup and you just have to accept it. But overall, that's not a bad business model to equip all these startups. And I think it's still true, and we have this capability to serve at scale quite rapidly. Maybe in terms of sales process, integration, like capacity to onboard them also from a compliance perspective. So again, to be discussed a bit later, because we have a quite unique positioning there. But long story short, we have this capability to serve quickly, not in a self-serve mode, but in a self-serve mode, all these startups, and it's good for everybody. It's good for us because we're happy to onboard them without spending like months of integration or of work with them. And they're happy because they would not pay the usual very expensive fees that you can pay with other players on the market when you just want to issue cards. Having said this, I think we slowly evolve, and that's one of the purposes of this Series B. We evolve because we also observe that it's a market where you also need to start equipping larger companies. Our product works very well when, if I take back the example of Agicap, or I can use another example, that of Penny Lane, for instance, which is one of our major customers. Penny Lane, the product works very well. The Swan products works very well because they already have a customer base. They have this sort of distribution platform, and it's now only a matter of pushing additional products. That's essentially what we do. They push additional products. Penny Lane is an accounting software. They take care of all the accounting of these companies, and then they tell you, hey, do you want to use this Swan Pro account or this Penny Lane Pro account to pay your invoices or to receive and accept payments? And it works well because there is an adoption that we observe, but it works, I think, fairly well with companies that already have this customer base installed, and that's really one of our purpose. How can we serve larger companies? Because we see that the product is even more successful if we start equipping companies that are a bit a bit further in their journey with once again an installed customer base.
Yeah, how can we help established companies be an innovative player in the market?
Exactly. And then, yeah, obviously there is this goal of becoming a bit more enterprise-driven, serving larger companies. We've started to do it. We have signed a contract with Carrefour, and we have provided them a cashback program. It's quite fascinating, that kind of examples, because you realize that these enterprise companies, they are actually looking for the same things as smaller companies might be looking for. It's a fast go-to-market, fast integration. We managed to make this work in a matter of 3 months. And that's the kind of examples that I like to highlight, because it's not because you're an enterprise that you are not looking for agility. And then we have to keep reassuring them with our stability, may it be financial or tech-wise. And I think it so far, as of now,
it's interesting.
It's still early in the journey, but I think we're we have built good foundations to keep growing.
Okay. So what I get here is that you guys are kind of going also a little bit up market, where you initially started with helping the startups in the fintech world, now also moving to more established player, to eventually, and Carrefour is then one example already, going more enterprise, and that's probably kind of a ongoing thing where you are trying to serve then the entire market segment, or would you like eventually to go more specific? Would you like to go only on enterprise in the long term, or would you like to
definitely
be able to serve?
We will never betray ourselves. I think we still have this role to play, and we have this very good product, and we also have, in my sales team, I have people who are dedicated to startups, and it will always be the case at Swan. And there is the general rule, and then you always have outliers among our top 10 customers. We do have some companies that started very small and that they are nailing it. I can think of a fuel card company called Piana, for instance, or a Portuguese neobank called Rova. They are both really doing well, and they started as small companies. So let's
go. Love it.
Let's keep powering this new wave of fintech.
Hi guys, once per quarter we are hosting the We Are Sales Virtual Summit, a 2 to 3 hours long free virtual event during which we'll deep dive on a specific theme. See this as an online training where we'll invite front runners to showcase their cutting edge practices that have been field tested and have proven to be effective. So the next one will be about how to leverage AI in sales, which will take place on November 9th, 2023. Again, the event is entirely free and you can simply register via our website. All right, let's go back. Exactly. Excellent. Now, Florent, what I would love to discuss with you is also the market expansion that you guys experienced at Swan, but that you also kind of experienced at Stripe. Because, I mean, there you were, let's say, more in the executor role, where you started, I guess, as kind of an AE, but then also head of sales for the French markets. And now at Swan, you, as you said earlier, you entered the company, make sure that we have a commercial structure and processes in place to actually also make the scale, but also the market expansion happen. So I think you have, that execution experience and that leadership experience, which is super, super interesting and relevant at the same time. So maybe, can you maybe kind of explain that expansion story now at Swan? What has happened? Start wherever you want to start. And obviously I will bombard you with some questions I have.
Okay. Maybe just one word to start answering this question. I think the main reason why I joined Swan after 6 years at Stripe, which is a company that I still cherish, and I loved my years there. But one of the main reasons, if not the main reason, is that I think that time has come for Europe to build its own tech giants. And I think that Swan can be one of these. And I think it's really a call for people. Whenever I interview people, I say this sentence, and you cannot imagine how people nod at this sentence, especially European folks, may they be Italian, Dutch people, German folks, anyway. They're all like, yes, we have to do it. because everybody is a bit afraid of working or like living in a world that is fully dominated by US tech companies or Chinese firms. Anyway, I hope that we'll do it well at Swan. I think we're also very lucky because we operate on a market where things have been very, very harmonized by Europe, by the European Union to be more precise. And like, I think we can all criticize Europe for things that are not done well. But if there is one thing that has been done well, it's this unification of the payment landscape. Just to take a step back, the regulation, our EMI license is passportable across 30 countries in Europe, which means
30 countries.
30 countries, 30,
Okay.
which means that you have your license in France. It takes like a few months to be able to serve any country in the European economic area. 30 countries overnight, or if not overnight, like let's say it's a matter of 1 or 2 quarters to be able to do this from a pure regulation perspective. That's huge, and it didn't exist 15 years ago, or even 10 years ago.
What does that mean exactly? Does that mean that you can provide all those banking kind of features in those 30 different countries?
Yeah, it means that you have the capability to, so it will be said in regulatory terms, but you have the capability to issue payment methods. You have the capability to initiate payment transfer on behalf of end customers, that kind of stuff. And we have this e-money license that allows us to do what we do today. And that's really big. And by the way, if you pay attention, if you look at all the successful fintech in Europe, they all rely. They were all built thanks to PSD1, PSD2, so Payment Service Directive number 1 or number 2. You can take examples. In France, you have this company called Litchi, which then became MangoPay, or there is a second company called MangoPay. It was created thanks to this EMI license. And there are so many examples. SlimPay in France, all the open banking firms that you can think of, they would not exist if we didn't have this regulation framework in place. So that's big, that's huge. And all this was created for one thing. Essentially, this regulation was made to say, hey, we must innovate in the banking industry. And if we only count on existing incumbents, so the large traditional bank, to innovate, it might take a bit more time than what it would take if we had a bunch of startups getting started. And this regulation, so it was, how can we facilitate the entry access to new players? And maybe let's start to think to break down the different jobs performed by a traditional bank, and let some companies do the issuing of cards. Let some others do some bank transfers. Let some others do remittance, and so forth. With lower entry barrier, not the same amount of funds that you would have to deposit and to collect to just be able to play and get started. It's like poker. You can enter the casino. Well, my compliance team would not be happy that I speak about that I use a gambling example to illustrate this, but that's really what it's about. It's how can you facilitate the access to this market by lowering the entry barrier, and that's what the European Union did with these regulations. By the way, there is a PSD3 that is arriving seemingly next year. We'll see.
Making it even more easier to enter the market.
Or
Lovely.
Opening. If I were an entrepreneur today, I would definitely, and passionate about fintech, this industry, I would carefully read the PSD3 drafts, because there will be some business opportunities there.
That's a good advice. But so explain, because I think Swan started in France, but then you still decided to, enter in a new market such as Berlin, now also recently in Spain. Congrats for that, by the way. But still you are, with the e-money license, able to, serve like 30 different countries. So how does that work exactly? Why do you have to have like a affiliate in a certain market? What's the biggest advantage difference with that?
That's a super good question. Huh? So the way you operate is we start to sell from France. When I joined, I said we had 15 customers. I think we had one customer in your country, in Belgium, and another one in Germany, and all the others were in France. I think Germany very quickly, because it's with France, these are the two biggest markets in Europe. It naturally became our number one priority to expand. And so you start thinking, hey, let's find some references to sign there. But to some extent, opening Germany was a no-brainer for us. So we didn't think too much about when should we start hiring. Let's do it post Series A. It was a given. Then why did we decide to have someone on the ground? Just because, I think 6 months after David joined us, the pipeline was multiplied by 5. So just having the amount of deals that we would be working on, having someone on the ground. He's based in Berlin, and now the team is composed of 5-6 people. Having someone on the ground who is networking with the entire ecosystem, who attends the event, who is able to meet prospects in person, it's just game changer. Who also comes with his own network, obviously, that facilitates the work. Then there is also a legal reason behind, because in our expansion playbook, we systematically open or build the capability to have local accounts, local IBANs. So IBANs, it starts with your 2-country letter in Europe. In France, it's FR followed by a number of digits. And because we have a very B2B orientation, the end customers are, for the bulk of them, companies, so B2B players. These companies do expect to have local IBANs. If you taking back the example of Penny Lane, if you are a German bakery and you want to be paid by customers, you will ask them to pay on a German account. People would not understand to pay you on a French account. So that's a must. It was not necessarily the case. If you take companies like Revolut, for instance, in the B2C space, that's a bit less true what I just said. Revolut, for long, they operated with Lithuanian IBANs, and they managed to very nicely expand just by having this local, Lithuanian IBANs. I think it's slowly changing. But anyway, long story short, I think whenever we enter a new country, there is a phase where we look for the first 2-3 references. We start to hire someone, and meanwhile, we start to work on the localization of the accounts. And we did it successfully in Germany. We did the same in Spain. We are actually currently we've hired 4-5 months ago Marnix, who is leading the charge in Netherlands from Amsterdam. And I think in 2 months we should be able to announce the Dutch IBANs, and we'll keep executing like this. Italy should be next on the map.
Awesome. Okay, that's interesting. So the goal for Swan is really to go and have an office in the local, or at least a team operating in the local market, getting those IBANs, for example, as this is part of the expansion playbook. But still, you are able to now serve customers that are not where you guys are not having a local presence, right? So how is there a big disadvantage then, or what are the limitations when it comes to that?
So the first thing, we do serve customers in 13 countries, 13. So we have, I think we cover the 3 Baltic countries. We have some, like I told you, Belgium, Luxembourg, Portugal, Italy. So it's a quite decent coverage. So I think, unfortunately, for some smaller countries, sometimes they just don't have the choice, and I'm sorry for them, but it's just that there is no bass player able to accompany them on such a local small market. And I hope that we'll be able one day to serve any of them very locally with this hyper localization. Then I would say a second thing, for all use cases that we do cover, there is not a need to have local IBANs. I give you a concrete example. Expense management. For expense management, it's actually more about providing cards to your employees, to employees of the companies that you serve. And granted, at some point you need people to put money on a bank account, but it's fine if you're operating in Belgium and you offer French accounts, it's fine. And it's it's not the daily user experience that end customers will be facing. So that's not that worrying. And then third, sometimes it's just, they deal with it. In the best case, they accept to wait for us to be ready to launch for the Spanish market. For instance, the first partners were signed with French IBANs, and they migrated to Spanish IBANs once we were ready. And that might just be fine for some for some of them.
Yeah, and at least that also may be very interesting for Swan, actually, because if you have like a lot of companies coming from a market that's already showing interest in Swan, even though there are those limitations, then that maybe could be an indication for Swan to really enter proactively that market, right?
Yeah. And we try to keep having this very down to earth, like a pragmatic approach to open new countries and to prioritize our roadmap.
I was going to ask you that. Why did you start with Berlin? Why wasn't the next one Spain? Was there specific reason why following that order?
Yeah, if you take so there are many aspects that you can take into account, but there is how vibrant is the tech ecosystem? What is the GDP? Where do we see besides the tech ecosystem, more precisely fintech scene? We also had one investor, a German investor, so that helped having a bit of network. It just made total sense for you. Also take a look, obviously, at the competition. Where is the competition? This is a double-edged argument, by the way, because where there is competition, you might believe that there is allegedly there will be some customers, but where there is competition, it will be harder to penetrate. But we could see that German was a big market. I think, once again, back to Europe and expansion, how to prioritize this. If you're a French company, I think the German in the tech industry, in the fintech industry, German and Spanish market are really the two obvious one. Italy is unfortunately a bit behind in terms of maturity. Netherlands is very strong but much smaller, so that's a bit and then there is a big question: what's next? Do you start to serve Portugal? Do you start to serve Belgium? Do you start to serve other countries, maybe the Nordics, but they come with different currencies because Sweden, Norway, and Denmark don't have the euro. So that's where you start to reach the limits of the exercise.
Yeah, right. Because I was also wondering, it's probably a balance, and there's no right or wrong answer to that. But what would you say is more important? Is it the business opportunity of a market, or the ease of entering it? I can see that both have a factor on it, but what would you say is more impactful?
Once again, back to my point about payment being maybe the best playing field to expand Europe at a European scale. I mentioned regulation, but that's not the only thing. SEPA, which is this unified way to transfer money through the European zone, it's applicable to 30 countries. You get even in countries where the euro, Poland, you can do a transfer using the SEPA rails to a Polish bank account, and it will be a euro transfer, obviously, not a zloty transfer, but it's still you can still do it. So regulation, SEPA rails, Eurozone, it's 90 countries, soon 20 because Croatia is joining the club. And then cards that you can issue. We issue MasterCard cards, and likewise, a card that you issue with MasterCard can be used in any country in Europe. So as such, back to your point about how easy is it to enter, we are lucky enough to be working on a market where it's actually fairly easy to enter a new market. It's not the same, I was thinking the other day and discussing with a company that is operating in the HR space, and where you have to learn the local work laws, labor laws, and understand them. it's much more complex to operate this, and you don't have the same level of scalability. While for us, I think, once again, I don't want to make this appear too simple, but once we have these local accounts, local IBANs, sometimes, granted, you have you obviously have to localize the language. It's not that complicated. You obviously have to localize a bit the KYC procedure and so forth, but it's not overcomplicated. So
That's interesting. I would have thought that indeed fintech would be much more complicated than HR.
yeah, and
So
maybe it's
thanks,
not,
Europe.
and maybe it's not true for all startups. I think for payment acquisition, for instance, I think it's much more complex because cards will work to accept payments. Card will work in France, Spain, super good. If you go to Netherlands, I think 75% of the payment are being done with Ideal, which is a local payment scheme. And if you don't offer Ideal as a payment method, there is no way you sign a customer in Netherlands. Same, I think you're Belgium. You must be a heavy user of Bank Contact, which is
Absolutely.
a local scheme that you have to integrate. And so I think for payment acquiring, which is a business that I know, I think it was a bit more of a challenge and less scalable than what we have today and the business we operate in.
Gotcha. What can you say about, because I know with EduCap, which is more cash flow management, scale up if I'm not mistaken, you also worked with Carrefour, which is then a retailer, like completely different industries. Was it also like a strategic choice of you guys to say we will go very broad, very horizontal, or have you actually chosen specific verticals that you focus on?
It's I love how some companies manage to storytell this, but after everything has been done, the truth is that I think for the first year, we are just accepting anything because, at least, and so the first 2 years of commercialization, the 1 year when I was not working at Swan, and then my first year at Swan. Just because you're not strong enough, you're not rich enough, you're not installed enough to say, you cannot necessarily afford
you need projects, and you don't know actually what the market wants. I mean, which market want.
You will build your product based on all the feedbacks that you keep collecting every week, every day, and that's it.
Could you now after signed 100 clients say there are some verticals?
Actually, we started 2023 telling ourselves, okay, let's focus on 5 verticals. We call them target segments.
Interesting.
And we have listed, for all these for each of these target segments, we listed the companies that we wanted to contact. We build some specific material, so the marketing team is helping tremendously there. And we have a much more intentional focus on these target segments where we know that we will perform. I will not necessarily disclose everything because this can be a bit strategic, but for instance, financial software that I mentioned was one of them. We know that we have a very good product market fit. We have nice references, and it will be easier to then scale. For instance, we just signed a company called Yuki in Netherlands, and it's the equivalent of Penny Lane that we already have as a customer in France.
I know Yuki,
you know, and we would not, I don't think we would have signed Yuki if we didn't have that expertise on financial management. And it's a mix of expertise, references, that just helps quite a lot. So indeed, now that we have more, and that was one of your early questions that I didn't answer, but we use also to have quite a lot of inbound. We are quite lucky, but the team has grown, and the number of inbound that we receive also grew, but less rapidly. So at some point, if you want to feed your account executive team, your sales team, you have to change your way of selling, or at least at this stage of creating pipeline. And I think now we're close to 75% of our pipeline created through outbound, and which is much more in line with I think the industry standard for what we sell, the average size of deals that we size.
That's interesting. I read somewhere, I think it was on the website of Swan, that you identified 3 main pillars for localizations. And so I would like to hear from you, like, what are those three main pillars, and how does this, is part of the expansion playbook?
We say three pillars.
Yeah, I can tell you, it's language, country-specific banking features, and an adaptable regulatory framework.
Yeah. I think we sort of covered the two latest, because but on the first one, I think the most interesting part is, once again, we're a white label banking as a service product, so we tend to not be in direct contact with end customers, but it might be the case, like for certain questions. And as such, we have realized that we had to adapt this. I think this language component is mostly related to just being able to interact very fluidly with both your partners and customers. Here we can see it, like in Spain. I wouldn't want to do this podcast in Spanish because my Spanish is not good enough. But I was forced to do, like, because I'm based in Spain, and by the way, I didn't precise it. I'm based in Barcelona, and you actually start to meet some prospects who don't speak English. As such, you have to make the effort of localizing yourself. I found myself making demo in Spanish because I had no team there in Spain. Luckily, we hired some people. Luckily for our customers and partners, we hired, not me. We hired some people able to speak Spanish, and that's indeed just a step towards having a closer product market fit.
I would say that makes sense. Hi guys, I quickly want to let you know that we are doubling down on this podcast, and by so doing, we are looking for the better revenue stories out there. So if you like what you hear, please give it a like or a follow. It is a simple click on a button, but that click would mean the world to us. All right, let's go back. But how do you then, especially regarding like the expansion playbook, because you also mentioned it earlier, is that something that you kind of created on the go while making some mistakes here and there, or were you able to find, experience elsewhere and really take their learnings and implement it immediately at Swan?
Sure. I return the question, Dylan. What would be for you the iconic example of a European B2B company that managed to expand throughout Europe?
In your specific context or in general?
No, in general.
I don't know, if it would be me, I think study competitors or other players in a similar context as me, and study what they do. Maybe also interview some people that are not direct competitors.
Yeah. Okay. Like, I return the question, like, not to, but because that, like, frankly, after a couple of months at Swan, that was one of my main questions. Hey, what is the playbook of a B2B European company that we could reuse and apply to ourselves? And it's crazy because I think we have a number of examples of American companies who land in Europe and manage to successfully expand throughout Europe. But frankly, like European companies, it's not that obvious. There are not that many examples. They tend, like a lot of these companies tend to say, hey, I'm Talent Software, French top SaaS company. Let's expand to the US. But they would not necessarily spend hours or months expanding throughout Europe. So as such, I believe that we sort of did it ourselves. And
Wow.
And then now that we have we have then our internal playbook that we keep repeating when we open new countries. I had something else in mind, but I forgot on this topic. Okay, if it comes.
Yeah, if it comes to mind, don't hesitate to bring it back. What about the recruiting of new team members?
Oh,
I think that might be a big one.
Yes, actually, maybe I should have started by this because that's actually your number one challenge.
Why?
Yeah, no, why? Like because obviously it's only a people topic. It's only like, do you hire the right people? Do you hire people who will embody your company, your brand? Do you hire people like I think with Nicolas Benadi, our CEO, we gathered when I joined Swan, or it was even like during my interview process, and we realized that we were very aligned on the nature of salespeople we wanted to hire, and we were very aligned because we do sell. Like I think first, we are looking for people who can abstract complexity, who are curious, we sell a pretty complex product where you will have to dive into the API documentation. You also have to understand the regulation. So you have to find that kind of people, not easy. That should also be good salespeople. And besides, it was really core to Swan's. It was foundational at Swan. Nicolas didn't want us to sell in a very salesy way. He didn't want the sales process to be binding. He hates that kind of company where you have to sign to commit for 3 years, where even though you're a startup, you have to pay minimum fees for 12 months, 24 months, whatever. And so I think I was very aligned with this. We wanted to have this approach and to hire people who were aligned with this. So you define your framework like this.
That's why you also said we have partners and don't clients. And if I talk about customers, it's the customers of our partners.
Yeah, I think that's like the semantic speaks for itself, indeed. And then finding the right people. I think the most challenging part when you hire people on a remote office is how much support can you give them? How do you make sure that even though you work from a different office, at least we don't have different time zones. When I was working for Stripe, we had 9-hour difference, so that was another story.
Oh gosh.
Yes. we were staying until like 8 p.m. at the office, or even anyway. This is a past story. But yeah, indeed, you have to make sure that you support people. You have to make them feel comfortable traveling and coming at the Paris office. It's actually not that much. It should not be a matter of money, of paying them a hotel for 3 weeks in a row. Like, frankly, it's a no-brainer. Like, people should come and should feel close to the company, should be fully onboarded from a culture perspective, like both from a sales, product, and so forth, but also from a culture perspective, because then you are just throwing someone alone in his country to start with, at least, and this person, must embody your firm. That's not a given.
Yeah, I can imagine. It has to be someone a little bit entrepreneurial that knows how to sell. I mean, how to get like a deal, a partnership around. He or she needs to be very into the product, into the technology, into the
everything.
And what I think is also maybe even more challenging, or maybe you have tips, advices around that, and I'm very curious. But suppose, I'm from Belgium and I want to find those talents in Spain, but I'm not from Spain. I might have some clients in Spain, I might do some business in Spain, but I'm not from there, I don't know anyone. So how do you even get started in finding any talent?
Luck is a component there. I see. No. I make a joke, but first thing, your company should be able to accept these new people, these foreign people. That's one thing that we did well at Swan when I joined. I was looking for a European company. I was not looking for a French company. And from day one, the website of Swan was in English. We only translated the website in French, I think 6 months ago, which is quite rare. And you have many French companies who say, hey, I'm a European, but actually they're not, because everybody speaks French, everything is in French. At Swan, Slack is fully in English. And once again, before I joined, we had managed to hire maybe not that many people. It was maybe 5-6 people. So 15% of the company were people who are not French, but at least you start to create this culture of inclusion where you say, hey, it's more easy to integrate at Swan and to adapt yourself to the culture of the company. So I think this part would be absolutely necessary. And then once you have managed to include these first people, this first hire, and to also include people from other offices. Quite a challenge. I think you should always have a plan to every 6 to 12 months grow the office, because it's completely depressing if you are one person serving Swan locally and you don't see like the end of the lonely funnel. We are today, I told you, 5 people here in the Barcelona office. We have someone else arriving in 4 months now, or 3 months. So like it keeps growing like this, and it's very healthy because like you start at, you have a minimum number of people to start having interaction, and it's not only one person focused on his computer, or 2 people who like keep bonding together or not in the worst case.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's quite important to, when you open a country, systematically think of how you will make sure that this local office will keep growing. And to illustrate this, for instance, I told you about our outbound, increasingly growing outbound strategy. And we have now decided to hire local SDR as a way to support account executive. And that's a great way to make sure that we grow, like we both grow the office while being more impactful and more efficient from a sales perspective.
Yeah, that's good. Also good for the collaboration, I would say, between sales developers and
it's needed.
Yeah, and also remember from the preparation that you, as part of the leadership team, you actually started. I think that was kind of a demand of yours from Barcelona.
Yeah.
While the rest of the team was in France, and I think you had like an interesting remark about that. Can you share?
Yeah. So, so between Swan and Stripe, I decided with my family to move to Barcelona, and I worked for a few months for another company. And indeed, when I started to interview for Swan, I told first interview, I said, "Hey guys, I'm super keen to start discussing with you, and the job looks fantastic, company as well. Yet, I have 3 kids, and like you have found a school, you have found an apartment, you have all your papers, like everything is done. Plus, Barcelona is a great city to live in. You have friends as well, which is cool. So I was like, hey, I'm happy to make back and forth to Paris every 3 weeks, every 4 weeks, but ideally I would stay in Barcelona." And it was accepted. And I think, interestingly, what was maybe at first a constraint that I imposed the company then became quite a force for the company, quite a strength. And why? It's because we started to see like I forced them sometimes to make decision in a written mode. I have a strong written culture, also comes from Stripe, I guess. But everything, like you do a meeting, you write notes, you share them, stop the orality. And because I was like this C-level outside of the headquarters, and I just needed to be kept informed. And I think that definitely played a role in the, this helped the company becoming a bit more remote friendly with me. Then when we onboarded our head of DAR, David, it was also, I think, easier because we had some routines in place. And then I think it also facilitated. Here we have hired Julia, who is leading our Spanish team. And I think, being there, helping her in the very first months, now she's fully independent. She no longer needs me. But it was definitely a good thing for me to be there.
No, I can imagine, and I think that's an interesting thing, which I don't think a lot of people would think of automatically, of maybe already spreading the team, because of that. 2 years ago, you guys were kind of already European. I mean, you had people in France, you had people in Spain, and then you start doing business also in Berlin. So very quickly, you could call yourself European. And
I signed the first Spanish customers. It was once again, I was not meant to sign Spanish customers, but hey, Flo, you're in Spain, you're in Barcelona. There is this event, we spotted an event in Madrid with all the tech scenery. It made total sense for me to be there.
Interesting.
I go, and you meet, frankly, it's so helpful. And you also start to create your own network. Like once again, I think it's much better if you have local people who speak fully the language, who have the right connections, who everything is facilitated, and that's the purpose of hiring local people. But that helps eventually, indeed.
No, for sure. We are unfortunately almost reaching the end of the interview, Florent. I feel like there's still so much to unpack, but so I will still ask you one maybe very important question. Like, I'm sure that along the way you guys have done like a couple of maybe stupid stuff, if I can say it like that, like a little bit of pains in the experience of expanding. And are there some that, come up top of mind like that?
I think I already mentioned this, the pipeline creation stuff might well be it's top of mind for me right now.
Say again? Yeah, what was the...
pipeline creation, and you like when you're lucky enough to start having inbound, you sort of say, hey, it will last forever. It doesn't. So you have to I also have this bias towards closing, and I'm more appealed by closing deals that you have in your pipeline. But I think having some time fully dedicated to doing outbound. As an FYI, we have started with something which started as an experiment and is now becoming a weekly routine. On Tuesday, we have this pipeline creation day. Every Tuesday, everybody in the team, from like sales managers, including myself, to SDRs, and of course AEs, no meeting in the day. You shall not accept meetings in the day, and you only have to do outbound. And we start the day with, hey, this is the target segment that we will focus on. This is the category of companies we will focus on, and we will work on this. And for the full day, you outbound to this list of companies. And I think it took us a bit of time to realize that we had a gap in the sales machine in terms of pipeline creation. You keep thinking that by telling account executives every week that they have to dedicate some time to outbound, they will. They don't. Because outbound is tough, and because you don't want to do it. And instead replacing it by this focused day to create pipeline, and where everybody is rolling up their sleeves and doing it, it's quite powerful.
That's good. That's a good learning, actually. Don't take pipeline for granted. Go after it, and and now you kind of implement those days. I like it.
Yeah,
thanks for sharing that.
Because once again, when you ask your A's, everybody is convinced that they have to do outbound every week, and they tell you, yeah, my Thursday morning is dedicated to outbound, and then you trust them, and sometimes they do it, and sometimes they want to do it, like the will is there, but then they receive a phone call or they schedule a meeting. You have to block some time and to dedicate it to pipeline creation.
I think that's a good advice for ending this podcast. Thank you so much, Florent, for doing all this. If there is like a call to action that you would like to do via this platform to our listeners, maybe there are some people that want to join Swan, maybe there's some people that want to implement Swan. Like, where would you?
I think that's if I had one call, it would be we keep recruiting. I currently have in my team 4 open roles, and there are more at Swan. I recruit a head of sales for Southern Europe. I recruit an account executive to develop the Italian market from Milano. We are recruiting 2 SDRs, one based in Amsterdam and another one based in Berlin. So if you ever listen to this and are keen to help us, come, apply. Everything is available on a website called Welcome to the Jungle. And you can find our job offers there. Or otherwise, I think you can just go on swan.io and find a link to this website. I think we are,
excellent.
If you'd like to contribute to this pretty nice endeavor, I think it's the right time.
They know where to go now. Awesome. Well, to sum it all up, if there is one last thought you would like to leave our listeners with, what would it be?
If there is one
last thought based on everything that we said that you want to leave our listeners with, what would that be?
I'm going back to this motto, my mantra of time has come for Europe to build its own tech giants.
Let's go.
No, I mean it. There are still plenty of opportunities, and we should be proud of what we do, and it's quite some hard work, but we like we're the generation who should be doing it, so let's do it.
I like that. So if there are other people coming from the fintech field or want to, let's go. Level up a gear. Let's go. I love that.
Cool.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Florent.
Bye-bye.
Wish you nothing but the best. See you next time. That's it. We've once again reached the end of an episode. I just really appreciate you all spending the time. If you like what you heard, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. And until next week with a fresh new episode.